On February 4, 2025, former President Donald Trump reignited a contentious debate by restating his proposal for a U.S. takeover of Gaza, sparking widespread protests among Palestinians and condemnation from various international figures and organizations. His plan envisions that once hostilities between Israel and Hamas cease, control of the Gaza Strip would be transferred to the United States. Trump presented this initiative as part of a grand redevelopment project aimed at transforming Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East. He further claimed that this ambitious undertaking would not necessitate the deployment of American troops, a stark departure from earlier assertions made by his administration that any displacement of Palestinians would be a temporary measure. Summary of Trump's proposal. In a post on Truth Social, Trump detailed his vision for Gaza, stating, "The Gaza Strip would be turned over to the United States by Israel at the conclusion of fighting." He suggested that once control is handed over, the U.S. would initiate a redevelopment project that he believes could become one of the most impressive projects globally. Trump emphasized that Palestinians would be relocated to safer and more beautiful communities prior to redevelopment efforts. Palestinian response. The reaction from Palestinians was swift and vehement. Protests erupted in Gaza on February 6, 2025, with demonstrators adamantly rejecting Trump's vision. Many held banners that declared, "These lands are ours. We will build and develop Gaza with our will and determination." This grassroots movement underscored the deep-seated attachment to their land and a collective determination to oppose any external plans that threaten their sovereignty. Reactions from officials and international community. Trump's comments did not go unnoticed by political leaders and organizations worldwide. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio publicly supported Trump's assertion, arguing that Gaza must be free from Hamas. However, this backing was met with substantial backlash. Critics accused Trump of endorsing ethnic cleansing, highlighting the fact that forcibly transferring populations from occupied territories is prohibited under international law. The United Nations and several Arab leaders condemned the proposal, characterizing it as reckless and potentially dangerous. The contradictory nature of Trump's statements has also raised eyebrows among his advisors. Initially, Trump's administration suggested that any displacement of Palestinians would be temporary, directly conflicting with Trump's suggestion of a more permanent resettlement. This inconsistency has led to skepticism regarding the viability of his plan. Context of the humanitarian crisis. Trump's proposal comes against the backdrop of a severe humanitarian crisis in Gaza, which has been devastated by 15 months of intense conflict. Over 50 million tons of debris have accumulated, with extensive destruction rendering much of the territory uninhabitable. The United Nations has warned of dire conditions, including non-functional water systems and a high risk of contamination from destroyed infrastructure. The humanitarian toll has been staggering, with reports indicating over 47,550 deaths in Gaza since the onset of fighting. Timeline of events. 1. October 7, 2023, Hamas launches a surprise attack resulting in approximately 1,200 deaths and 251 hostages taken. 2. Following months, the Israeli military responds with extensive operations against Hamas, leading to significant casualties and destruction in Gaza. 3. February 4, 2025, Trump proposes a U.S. takeover of Gaza, asserting that Palestinians would be relocated to safer areas. 4. February 6, 2025, protests arise in Gaza against Trump's proposals, highlighting Palestinian claims to land in opposition to displacement. Conclusion. Trump's restated plan for a U.S. takeover of Gaza has reignited long-standing tensions surrounding Palestinian rights and sovereignty. The proposal has sparked significant protests and condemnation, drawing attention to the urgent humanitarian crisis unfolding in the region. The ambiguity surrounding the plan's feasibility, coupled with the divergent views within Trump's administration, has left many observers doubtful about the likelihood of its realization. As the situation evolves, the international community continues to watch closely. Aware of the potential implications for peace and stability in the Middle East. The proposal for a U.S. takeover of Gaza by Donald Trump presents several counterintuitive elements that challenge conventional understandings of international relations, humanitarian law, and the geopolitical landscape in the Middle East, which raises questions about the feasibility of such an operation. It challenges the assumption that military presence is typically required for stability or governance in conflict zones. This notion is counterintuitive given the historical context where military involvement has often been deemed necessary to maintain order during reconstruction efforts. 3. Contradictory messaging. Trump's statements have created confusion, especially regarding the nature of Palestinian displacement, whether it would be temporary or permanent. This inconsistency undermines the credibility of the proposal and suggests a lack of coherent strategy. The idea that a significant population could be moved without clear parameters or timelines is contrary to standard practices in conflict resolution and peacebuilding. 4. Perception of development. The framing of Gaza as a potential Riviera of the Middle East is counterintuitive when considering the current humanitarian crisis. It presents a stark contrast between a vision of luxury and redevelopment and the harsh realities faced by the population. This juxtaposition may be perceived as insensitive, highlighting a disconnect between the aspirational goals of political leaders and the lived experiences of those affected by conflict. 5. Support for controversial ideas. While some U.S. officials like Secretary of State Marco Rubio expressed support for Trump's plan, it raises questions about the broader implications of endorsing such controversial proposals. The notion that dismantling Hamas and relocating Palestinians could lead to a more stable region is a simplistic view that overlooks historical complexities and the deep-seated grievances of the Palestinian people. This perspective challenges the conventional wisdom that sustainable peace requires addressing the root causes of conflict rather than imposing external solutions. 6. Ethnic cleansing accusations. The suggestion that the U.S. could take over Gaza has led to accusations of ethnic cleansing, which contradicts the narrative of humanitarian intervention. This perspective frames the discussion in a way that challenges the legitimacy of external powers intervening in sovereign territories under the guise of development, complicating the ethical considerations of such actions. 7. Response from the international community. The backlash from various international actors, including the United Nations and Arab leaders, emphasizes the rejection of Trump's proposal as a violation of Palestinian rights. This response signifies a counterintuitive shift where traditional allies may distance themselves from U.S. policy, suggesting that unilateral approaches to international issues can lead to increased isolation rather than cooperation. 8. Public sentiment in Gaza. The protests in Gaza against Trump's plan reflect a profound rejection of external control over their land, countering the assumption that foreign intervention is generally welcomed for reconstruction efforts. The strong assertion of Palestinian identity and rights challenges the narrative that external powers can dictate the future of occupied territories without regard for local sentiment. In summary, Trump's proposal for a U.S. takeover of Gaza is laden with counterintuitive elements that challenge established norms regarding international law, military involvement in humanitarian efforts, and the complexities of geopolitical relations. The dissonance between aspirational development goals and the harsh realities on the ground highlights the difficulties in reconciling external interventions with the legitimate rights and desires of affected populations. Donald Trump's recent proposal regarding the U.S. takeover of Gaza has raised numerous contentious issues that many observers may overlook amidst the outrage and protests it has incited. Here are some critical elements of the report that deserve closer examination along with their significance. 1. Contradictory statements and lack of clarity. Trump's statements about relocating Palestinians and the nature of control over Gaza are marred by contradictions. Initially, his administration suggested that any displacement of Palestinians would be temporary. Yet Trump implied a more permanent solution. This inconsistency is significant because it reflects a deeper inability within the U.S. political framework to present a coherent and feasible plan for Gaza. Analysts and international observers may question the viability of the proposal, especially given the prior history of U.S. involvement in the region where plans often lack practical implementation and clarity. 2. Ethnic cleansing accusations. The proposal to resettle Palestinians has been described by critics as a plan for ethnic cleansing, a term that carries immense historical and legal weight. The significance of this accusation lies in the implications for international law and human rights. Forcibly transferring populations from occupied territories is prohibited under international law, particularly the Fourth Geneva Convention. Such allegations could lead to increased scrutiny of U.S. actions and policies in the region, potentially inciting global condemnation and isolation. 3. Humanitarian crisis context. The backdrop of a humanitarian disaster in Gaza is a crucial factor that many might overlook when discussing Trump's proposal. The extent of destruction, over 50 million tons of debris, widespread casualties exceeding 47550, and the near-total collapse of infrastructure paints a stark picture of the challenges facing any redevelopment efforts. The conditions in Gaza necessitate urgent humanitarian intervention rather than grandiose redevelopment plans. Ignoring this context risks reducing the lives of millions to mere statistics in a geopolitical game, overlooking the immediate needs for aid, shelter, and basic services for those affected by the conflict. 4. Responses from Palestinian and Arab leaders. The vehement protests from Palestinians and condemnation from Arab leaders highlight a profound disregard for the rights and voices of the people directly affected by the proposal. The significance here lies in the potential for escalating tensions not only within Gaza but across the broader Middle East. Ignoring local sentiments and aspirations could undermine any attempts to achieve a long-term resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The backlash also signals the fragility of peace efforts in a region still grappling with deep-seated grievances and historical injustices. 5. International legal ramifications. The plan for a U.S. takeover of Gaza raises significant legal questions under international law. The UN and various human rights organizations have condemned the proposal, emphasizing the illegality of forcibly transferring populations. This aspect is often overlooked in discussions focused on the political ramifications, yet it is vital for understanding the potential future implications for U.S. foreign policy. If the U.S. were to pursue such a plan, it could find itself in violation of international law, leading to legal repercussions and a potential loss of legitimacy on the world stage. 6. Reactions within the U.S. political landscape. Trump's statements have not only drawn criticism from international leaders but also from within the U.S. political spectrum. The mixed reactions, including support from Secretary of State Marco Rubio and condemnation from other prominent figures, highlight a divided political landscape regarding foreign policy in the Middle East. This division is significant as it reflects broader ideological struggles within the U.S. government, potentially impacting future U.S. engagements in the region. The internal conflict may also affect public perception, complicating the possibility of a unified approach to resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. 7. Feasibility of reconstruction plans. Trump's vision of transforming Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East is ambitious yet lacks substantive details regarding its feasibility. The logistical challenges of rebuilding in a war-torn area with extensive infrastructural damage call into question the practicality of such a vision. Moreover, the absence of a clear plan for engaging with Palestinian leaders and communities in this process could hinder any genuine reconstruction efforts. This oversight underscores a common critique of top-down approaches to development that fail to consider local needs, rights, and participation. 8. Geopolitical implications. The proposal has significant geopolitical ramifications, especially considering the U.S.'s historical role in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. By suggesting a takeover, Trump is positioning the U.S. as an arbiter in a conflict that has traditionally involved direct negotiations between Israel and Palestinians. This shift in dynamics could escalate tensions between the U.S., Israel, and Arab nations. The potential for increased hostilities in the region, particularly if Palestinians perceive the takeover as an affront to their sovereignty, is a consequence that must be carefully considered. Conclusion: Trump's proposal for a U.S. takeover of Gaza is laden with complexities that extend far beyond the immediate reactions of Palestinians and international leaders. The contradictions in U.S. policy, the humanitarian context, legal ramifications, and geopolitical implications present a multifaceted challenge that requires careful scrutiny. Ignoring these elements could result in missed opportunities for meaningful dialogue and resolution in a region that has long been plagued by conflict and suffering. As the situation evolves, it will be crucial to remain attuned to these underlying issues to foster a more sustainable path forward for Gaza and its people. 1. Trump's proposal for U.S. control of Gaza. Former President Donald Trump's recent statements suggest a radical vision for the Gaza Strip, where he proposes that Israel could hand over control to the United States post-conflict. This plan includes relocating Palestinians to what he describes as safer and more beautiful communities before redevelopment begins. The ambition to transform Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East underscores a significant shift in the U.S.'s approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, highlighting potential imperialistic undertones that raise ethical and legal concerns regarding sovereignty and self-determination. 2. Palestinian response and protests. The reaction from the Palestinian community has been one of vehement opposition, exemplified by widespread protests in Gaza. Demonstrators assert their rightful claim to the land, emphasizing the message that they will build and develop Gaza independently. The banners carried by protesters reflect a deep sense of identity and resistance against external control, illustrating the complex dynamics of territorial rights and the psychological impact of displacement proposals on the Palestinian populace. 3. International law and human rights concerns. Trump's proposal has incited accusations of ethnic cleansing, with critics highlighting that the forcible transfer of populations from occupied territories violates international law. The United Nations and various human rights organizations have condemned the plan, pointing out that such actions are not only ethically dubious but also illegal under existing international statutes. The discussion around Trump's plans, therefore, serves as a crucial lens through which to analyze the legal ramifications of proposed resettlement and the broader implications for international norms regarding human rights. 4. Divergent views within the U.S. administration. The contradictory statements from Trump's advisors regarding the nature of Palestinian displacement, whether it would be temporary or permanent, underscore a lack of coherent strategy and planning within the administration. This internal discord raises questions about the viability of Trump's vision and reflects broader uncertainties in U.S. foreign policy regarding the Middle East. Analysts express skepticism about the feasibility of implementing such a plan given the profound historical, cultural, and political complexities involved in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This inconsistency also contributes to a climate of confusion and mistrust, complicating diplomatic efforts in the region. 1. The British Mandate for Palestine 1920–1948, following World War I. The League of Nations granted Britain the mandate to govern Palestine. The British aimed to facilitate the establishment of a Jewish homeland while also respecting the rights of existing Arab inhabitants. However, tensions escalated between Jewish and Arab populations, leading to violent clashes and protests. The British government's struggle to mediate the conflicting national aspirations of Jews and Arabs ultimately resulted in significant unrest and the eventual end of the mandate. 2. The U.S. invasion of Iraq 2003. The U.S. led an invasion of Iraq under the pretext of eliminating weapons of mass destruction and promoting democracy. The aftermath saw significant instability, sectarian violence, and humanitarian crises. The U.S. attempted to establish a new government and rebuild Iraq, but the actions faced backlash both internationally and domestically. with accusations of imperialism and disregard for Iraqi sovereignty. The long-term consequences included a power vacuum that contributed to the rise of extremist groups like ISIS. 3. The partition of India 1947. The British decision to partition India led to the creation of two independent nations, India and Pakistan. This division was accompanied by mass migrations and communal violence, resulting in the deaths of hundreds of thousands and the displacement of millions. The plan was intended to create a solution for Hindu and Muslim populations but resulted in long-term conflict and tensions between the two nations. The legacy of partition continues to impact relations in the region today. The recent proposal by former President Donald Trump regarding a U.S. takeover of Gaza has ignited significant controversy and protests, highlighting the complexities of Middle Eastern geopolitics and the enduring struggle for Palestinian rights. As we look to the future, several predictions can be made regarding the potential developments stemming from Trump's ambitious yet contentious plan. 1. Increased tensions and protests. The immediate aftermath of Trump's proposal is likely to see a surge in protests and unrest in Gaza and among Palestinian communities worldwide. As the proposal is viewed by many as a threat to Palestinian sovereignty and rights, the resistance from local and international activists will likely intensify. The potential for violent clashes could rise, further destabilizing the region. 2. International diplomatic backlash. Trump's plan has already faced condemnation from various international actors, including the United Nations and Arab leaders. As the implications of a U.S. takeover become clearer, it is plausible that diplomatic relations between the U.S. and several Middle Eastern countries could deteriorate. Countries that have historically supported Palestinian rights may adopt a more antagonistic stance towards the U.S., potentially leading to a broader regional realignment. 3. Challenges in implementation. The feasibility of Trump's vision for Gaza as the Riviera of the Middle East remains highly questionable. The area has been devastated by conflict, leaving behind extensive destruction and a humanitarian crisis. The logistical and financial challenges of rebuilding infrastructure, coupled with the necessity of addressing the needs and rights of Gazans, will likely hinder any attempts at implementation. The lack of clarity regarding the status of displaced Palestinians further complicates the narrative, with international law prohibiting forced relocation from occupied territories. 4. Shift in U.S. domestic politics. Trump's statements may provoke strong reactions within U.S. politics, both from Republicans and Democrats. As the 2024 presidential election approaches, candidates may leverage the situation to galvanize support or criticize Trump's approach. The potential for a divided Republican Party over foreign policy could emerge, affecting the broader political landscape and influencing voter sentiment. 5. Humanitarian aid and international involvement. In light of the severe humanitarian crisis in Gaza, it is likely that international humanitarian organizations will increase their efforts to provide aid to the region. The response from the international community may involve calls for increased funding and support for Gaza, focusing on immediate needs such as food, water, and medical supplies. This could lead to a dual approach where humanitarian efforts coexist with political maneuvers, complicating the overall situation. 6. Potential for new peace initiatives. The controversy surrounding Trump's proposal may catalyze a renewed push for peace negotiations in the region. Various stakeholders, including the U.S., European countries, and Arab nations, could seek to re-establish dialogue aimed at a comprehensive resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. However, the success of such initiatives would depend on the willingness of all parties to engage in meaningful discussions, which may be hindered by deep-seated mistrust. 7. Long-term effects on Palestinian identity. The situation may also have profound implications for Palestinian identity and nationalism. Resistance to external control and the assertion of rights to the land could solidify a more cohesive Palestinian identity, uniting various factions and groups under a shared cause. This could lead to a more organized and determined movement advocating for self-determination and sovereignty. 8. Geopolitical realignments. The proposed U.S. takeover of Gaza could prompt shifts in alliances and power dynamics in the Middle East. Countries like Iran, Turkey, and various Arab states may reassess their strategies in response to what they perceive as American imperialism, potentially leading to increased support for Palestinian groups opposed to U.S. influence. Conclusion. The future outlook on Trump's proposal for a U.S. takeover of Gaza suggests a landscape fraught with challenges, resistance, and potential opportunities for dialogue. The situation is fluid and developments will hinge on the responses from local populations, international actors, and the broader geopolitical context. As tensions rise and humanitarian needs grow, the need for a sustainable and just resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict remains more urgent than ever.